Are you thinking about starting your own podcast? Don't know where to start? Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to start a podcast. Let me tell you about it. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And best of all, it's free. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Just download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello, Candid Mamas, and welcome. You're listening to the Candid Motherhood podcast with Roxy
and Jackie,
where we tell you all about the ins and outs of motherhood.
We share our own life experiences to prepare you for the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes along with parenting.
So grab your coffee,
sit down,
get comfy,
and enjoy today's episode. Hey, Candid Mamas, welcome back to another Tell All Tuesday. So this episode is going to be all about the biggest mistakes that parents make. And we often make them, and not everybody is perfect. So we're going to give you some tips and some tricks on how to avoid them in your family and what you can do to help certain situations based off of age, from babies all the way up until their teen years. So Roxy, we're going to start with, I guess, babies and what mistakes parents make. What do you have that you can discuss?
So one of the mistakes I made with newborns would be one of them would be car seats. So not putting them properly in their car seats, not using the correct car seat, not, especially one of the biggest mistakes that I know a lot of new mothers, especially, or new fathers make is not strapping the babies in properly. I didn't know at first the chest clip had to be right at the armpit level, and the reason why, and stuff like that. So I think that along the way, I definitely learned that it's really important to get your car seat safety. I don't know, I guess crash course online would be beneficial to you, because that's probably the number one cause of deaths, in, I think we talked about it, ages under 44. Yeah. And it would be car crashes. So you always want to keep your kids safe.
Wait. I have a story about car seats. So when Nate was born, oh man, and we were taking him home from the hospital, we put him in the car seat, and we didn't know that the buckle just goes over the chest, and then the one in between the legs. Oh my God. We put his legs through the chest one. And so it was his arms and his legs were through this chest thing. And we did that for a few months. And somebody finally said, why are you putting him in the car seat like that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, that's not how this works. And I'm like, I was wondering why this thing was getting so small so quickly. I felt like such an idiot. And, the people at the hospital checked the car seat before you leave with the baby, and they didn't say anything. I'm like, poor kid, he's all strapped in all this cockamamie way. His legs probably losing circulation. Oh my God.
Yeah, see, I mean, especially when you're the first one in your family to have kids, I was, it's such a long time between when your parents had kids, when you had kids. And so it's they don't really remember. Car seats were so different back then, they weren't like they were today. So it's easy to do that. And also, I never knew that you're not supposed to put a kid in the car seat with a jacket on, like a winter coat, because it leaves too much space. Yeah. I didn't know that for a long time. So eventually, I learned it with Julie. Well, yeah, because it causes too much of a space between, because it's just air in between, but it's uncomfortable, Mm-hmm. So you always have to take the jacket off. So I didn't know that. That was something I learned.
Well, even you know, as the kids get older too, like the car seats change. We bought like one of those car seats. It was like the 3-in-1 that like, you know, it turns from the carrier then to like the back part with the booster and then just the booster. And like I see some of the parents that have kids our age and like maybe they're a little bit big for their age, but they have them like no car seat, no booster seat, sitting in the front seat. Like that's a big no. You're not supposed to sit in the front seat until you're like 13. And they just passed a law in New York that every single person in the car, whether
Yeah.
it's the front or the back, needs to be wearing a seatbelt. And I feel like as parents, you're like quick to want to transition them into the different car seats, but they need to be a certain height, they need to be a certain weight. You know, the car seat needs to fit a certain way in order for them to transition. So, you know, you make
Yes.
sure to want to like
They have to stay rear facing.
for 2 years.
I didn't know that either. With Julie, the law actually was until they were 1. And I changed her just before her first birthday because she's so tall. She was like a tall baby. So she reached the height requirement, but she didn't reach the age requirement.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that at first. My friend told me, she's like, I think she's too young to be that way. And then I was like, no, I don't think so. And she's like, yeah, I think she is. And then I realized that she is. But, you know, with Nikki and Jacob, I knew. So I learned.
Yeah, we did the same thing. Like with Nate, it was
Another thing.
but then with Lacey, it was 2 years old. Like I said, you know, you want to be like, you want to,
Yeah, they changed the law.
yeah, you want to feel like you want to transition them quickly because, you know, you just want to put the baby front facing because it could be annoying being faced the other way with the carrier. That was one thing I hated with the newborn stage, carrying that carrier around everywhere with the baby is so heavy, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I used to leave the car seat in the car and I used to do the baby carrier all the time and just put him in because I had 3 kids at that, like, especially with Jacob. It's impossible to be able to keep track of all 3 kids. I mean, the other 2 kids and carry a baby carrier, you know, it was just easier to stick him in the thing and be done with it hands free. One thing that I would say personally that I probably made this mistake and maybe a lot of new parents do is waking their baby up like their newborn to feed them. Like there are some people who wake their baby up every 2 to 3 hours like clockwork and whatever, feed them. But I think that after learning, you know, after having 3 kids, I find that it's better to just let them sleep and let them wake up and tell you when they're hungry, you know, and then as soon as they wake up, you feed them.
Yeah, absolutely. I did the same thing, even when it came to Nate, like my first kid. I didn't wake him up at all. And I felt like at first, like it made me nervous because they said, you know, he needs to eat every 2 to 3 hours. But obviously, if he's not waking up, he's not hungry. So when he gets up, he'll eat, you know?
I guess I can see why people would feed them every 3 hours because it helps them like get on a schedule or whatever. But I find that really at that age, babies don't really have a schedule, you know, it's just feed me all the time. Like I know my son, he wouldn't sleep more than an hour anyway when he was really little. So it's like they're gonna tell you when you're hungry.
Yeah, exactly.
Also I learned I learned this a few months in having a newborn, which probably would have been really helpful in the beginning, is to burp the baby halfway through their feeding when they're drinking formula from a bottle or even breast milk from a bottle. Because if you wait till the very end, it makes them super gassy. So I guess like pre-burping them or burping them midway.
With Lacey, we had to get her special formula because the regular formula just was not settling in her stomach. She was always like throwing up and stuff. So we switched to like the sensitive stomach one and that seemed to work. But it's funny because like, you know, the baby's drinking and, you know, they make those little noises when they drink like, you know, and and then you go burp them and they let out this loud, long burp and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. My babies were spitters too. Like they would spit up every single time. And I know another mistake with the bottle that I made, especially, I want to say with Jacob, I made this mistake. I really was like adamant about wanting to breastfeed that I didn't want to introduce to him the bottle, but I made a mistake not doing that because then he wouldn't take the bottle. So I couldn't leave him with anyone ever because he wouldn't even drink breast milk from the bottle. So I would say introduce the bottle right away.
Yeah, I did that. I tried to breastfeed with Nate, but like I guess I just never got milk. Like, even if you don't breastfeed, they like your boobs like still leak and stuff. I never got anything. They didn't hurt. Nothing ever happened. So when I was in the hospital, they like kind of made me feel bad about wanting to give my son a bottle because it was like a Catholic hospital and they didn't believe in that. But I said, he needs to eat. He's not getting it from me, so don't like shun me because I want to give him a bottle. And then with Lacey, I never even tried. I just automatically went to the bottle and it's perfectly fine. You don't have to breastfeed.
I would say the last thing for in the newborn that we're going to talk about today is overreacting when they're sick, because like what the first time your baby is sick and they get like the slightest fever, I know they felt true for me. Like I was ready to run to the hospital and they were just like going to send me home and just telling me to keep an eye on her, Yeah. So I would say that don't overreact when your baby gets sick, even if they have like Julie got I don't remember exactly nose, and she was so little. She was only like 5 months old the first time she got sick. So I was like freaking out, like, oh my God, she's got a fever, she can't breathe. But now it's like I really don't go to the hospital or the doctor unless like my kids are really, really bad. Like it's been over 3 days and I can't get them to get better, Vicks does wonders, especially for little tiny babies. Just put a little bit of Vicks on the bottom of their feet and on their chest, or right here behind their ears. That's a little trick I learned too. And I remember one night, Julie was like not able to sleep. Every time I would put her to sleep on her back, like, like that post-nasal drip, she'd just be coughing and not being able to sleep. So I actually put her to sleep inside of her stroller. I propped the back up just slightly, so like she was on an incline. And I put a light blanket like around it to kind of enclose it a little bit. And the Vicks from her that I put on her kind of like made a little of room of Vicks inside there. And she made it through the night. She slept through the night in there.
Yeah, that happened to me with, it's always your first kid, right? That you're like always a little crazy with. Like when Nate was like maybe 6 or 7 months old, he had like a fever and he started like throwing up like phlegm and mucus. And I was like, what the hell? So Rob took him to the doctor and the doctor told us that he was just teething and this was a side effect of teething. So I didn't know that, I found that out afterwards. So obviously, like when that happened with Lacey, I was like, oh, she must be teething. And I found these little homeopathic, like pain medicine for teething. They're like little tablets that would like dissolve in their mouth. That seemed to help.
It's really easy to like put yourself last when you're a new mom, but you want to make sure that you never like forget that you're someone apart from being a mom. So that's one of the mistakes that I know I've made, like losing yourself in motherhood and not still going out with your girls and or even your husband, neglecting your husband, going out on dates with him. You still want to keep your previous engagements, to a certain extent. You're not gonna be able to go out as often as you used to, but you still want to be able to do it every once in a while.
Yeah, one of the things that I can't stand that people do is when they have their baby sleep in the same bed as them. Like I was always adamant on them not doing that. They sleep in their own rooms, in their own cribs. In my room, even to this day, it's like kind of off limits to the kids. Like I don't really want them in here. This is like the only place in the house that I have that's for me. and I don't want them touching anything, and like that's my space. So
Yeah.
it just becomes an issue where the child becomes dependent on sleeping in the same bed as you, and it becomes a problem where you can't get them out of the bed.
I think it becomes a problem when they're a little bit older, because like under a year old, I don't think they grasp the concept like, oh, I'm sleeping in mom's bed and I need to stay here.
Yeah.
All three of my kids slept in the crib was in my room until they were at least a year and a half. Julie a little bit longer because our living situation required it. We only had one room, but
Yeah.
Jacob actually had to sleep in the bed with me because he wouldn't sleep by himself. I would only take the breast, so I was up like every hour or so, and it was just exhausting. And I slept on a bed that was on the floor, so there was no risk of him falling off and getting hurt. But Martin was very, very afraid to do that. Like you, he was like, no, I'm afraid I'm going to like roll on the baby at night. And I wasn't worried about that because I'm a very, very light sleeper. So any little tiny movement, like I'm jolted awake. So I never really had an issue. I guess it depends on everybody. Even being a super tired newborn mom, having two other kids, I still woke up on like every little creak and anything I heard. So Martin, sometimes he would just go sleep on the couch, which there's no action going on when newborn stage anyway, so I didn't mind.
Yeah. Well, also I think as a mom, you forget that like the newborn stage is easier in the sense of like taking a shower and taking care of yourself, because you can just leave the baby in like the bassinet or the swing and go take a shower. Once they start walking, it's game over.
Yeah, well, I kind of feel like that doesn't fall true for every baby though, because I had Julie, she was awesome. I could leave her in the bassinet. Nikki was so like I could leave him for about an hour maybe, but Martin was home a lot, so I just left him with him. Jacob, nope, he's a complete mama's boy. He wouldn't go with Martin for anything. Didn't even want Martin to look at him. If he would start screaming. And no, he only wanted me, and he wouldn't let me put him down. So I had to shower literally with him in the bathroom with me.
Oh my God.
I would put him in his bouncer right outside the shower curtain, and I just keep playing like peekaboo with him. That's how I had to shower, or he would come in with me.
Oh man.
All right, so now we're going to talk about parenting mistakes that you can do through the toddler years. I think one of the biggest mistakes that parents make with toddlers is being inconsistent with, I don't know, their routines or their punishment styles, or I should say discipline styles, or I guess like just in the way that they do things, because toddlers thrive on routines. So they want to know what to expect. So they want to be able to eat at the same time every day, take their nap at the same time every day, go to sleep at the same time every day. So also when they're misbehaving, you need to stay consistent with your discipline style. So if you're going to do a timeout for, certain thing, every time they do that thing, you have to do a timeout, and you can't just like do it sometimes and yes and sometimes no, because then they start thinking they can get away with things. Like right now, my son's in that phase and he's going through his terrible twos, and I'm starting to have to put him in timeout, and I've never had to do that before, but he's starting to try and get away with things. So I have to be consistent with him and tell him like, no, that's not good. You're going in timeout for that.
Yeah, like I'm such a pushover when it comes to actually enforcing things. I always tell the kids, I'm going to take away your iPad or your Switch, or you're going to go face the wall if you don't stop. But I haven't actually like done that in a few years.
That's not good.
I mean, obviously they get in trouble if.
Well, Nikki also, he's about to be 5, and he's going through some phase that he's like being like a little rebel. and he doesn't want to listen to anything I say, and he wants to ignore me. Well, also at bedtime, he's been giving me a really, really hard time. Like, he keeps saying, I don't want to go to bed. I don't want to go to bed. And then when I put him in bed, finally, he's like, he'll yell the whole time that I put him in there, like, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy. And so one of us goes, and then we go in there and we're like, what's wrong? I'm scared. Like, but he's got all his lights on and everything. So it's like, and then he ends up in our bed at some point in the middle of the night. So we're working on that. So I told him the other night, like, he needed to stop or he's getting his Xbox controller taken away, and he wouldn't stop. So I did. And he didn't have the Xbox the whole day.
Well, see, he didn't want to listen.
All right. So another mistake, I know I definitely made it in the beginning with Julie the first time, is, especially like new parents usually make this mistake. It's offering your toddlers too much help, like not letting them figure things out on their own, trying to do everything for them because you don't want to see them struggle. But it's good to let them struggle a little because that's how they learn. That's how they figure things out on their own. If you always do it for them, they're never going to learn how to do it on their own. So an example, when Julie was little, she was like, you know, when she was really little, we used to spoon feed her, whatever, right? Yeah. And then because I worked, she stayed a lot home with Martin a lot, and he babied her so much that he spoon fed her until she was like 3 years old. And then she didn't want to feed herself. She was always like, no, I'm not eating unless like you feed me. And we're like, well, you're old enough to feed yourself now, you know? So that's something that we should have let go of and not helped her so much with.
Yeah, I agree with that, because like, I feel like you're like stunting their growth and development. They need to be able to do things on their own and learn from their mistakes.
They have to be able to figure things out on their own. All right. I know another mistake that I definitely made with my toddler, especially, I want to say like with Julie, because, you know, you live and you learn after you have your first kid, like you become an expert, you know, because you know all the things you did wrong.
Yeah.
So I would say like feeding her only like quotational kid foods, you know?
Right, yeah.
Because then they don't want to eat anything else. They only want to eat the chicken nuggets and the mac and cheese and the French fries, which like everyone considers those kid foods. But if you feed them what you're eating straight from the go, then they don't know what kid food is, you know? They just know what mommy cooks is what we're eating. So that's definitely a mistake that I made with young Julie.
Yeah, I'm still having that problem with the kids because you know, it's just easy to give them those foods, you know, the pizza, the mac and cheese, the chicken nuggets, French fries. But like Lacey's like me in a way where she just will eat and eat and eat and eat, you know, and she has like a little belly on her now. Nate is more on the skinnier side, I guess. I mean, he's got a little bit of a belly, but I'm trying to really like control the food, because it was like a free for all for a while where they were just going into the fridge, into the pantry, and just eating whatever they wanted. Like Lacey had an ice pop before, and she just like on the door like 5 minutes later, can I have an applesauce? I'm like, no, you just had an ice pop. Why do you now need an applesauce? Like, you don't need that. So get over it. You're not having it. And I tell them now too, because like I would like a party size bag of Doritos and it would be gone in 2 days. So now I told them, you're not allowed to get any food unless you ask me first.
That's my rule too. I usually don't say no unless it's too close to dinner time, or they're just asking for a snack because they don't want to go to bed or something. For the most part, I never say no to food, but my kids don't really have a weight problem. They're so skinny and they're lucky. Like, I was never that skinny at their age. I think they took after their dad for sure. Yeah. But like Julie, she sneaks food all the time because she knows I'm going to say no to certain things like really sugary foods before bed and stuff like that. So she sneaks them, and we cleaned her room today, and I found, no joke, like 20 wrappers from Starbursts in her room. And I'm like, Julie, what is this? Like, this is way too many Starbursts. You cannot be eating this much candy. And I find wrappers in her room all the time. Chocolate, candy bars,
See, like, I feel
applesauce
like,
containers stuffed under her bed. And I'm like, first of all, we're gonna get Anne.
ew, that's so gross. See, Lacey like will not sneak food,
Yeah,
because I told her like she's not allowed. But Nate will sneak food, and I'll find like in his garbage just like wrappers and wrappers of crap everywhere. I mean, but I guess it's my fault because like I buy the food, but like I'm not one of those moms that are like gonna make them like mashed up carrots or some shit, you know? Like I want whatever's easy.
yeah. Well, this is my rule, and I try to stick to it. If they're eating something like, for example, today I made them chicken nuggets and fries, which they love, but I told them they also have to pick a veggie to go with it. So I let them pick whatever veggie they want. That's that we have. So Nikki picked carrots, and also in the store too, I asked them, like, what do you guys want? I let them pick out one snack each, one cereal each, and then one veggie each that they pick, and also some fruit. But that way they have things that they like. So when they go into the fridge, they already know what they can go and pick. Like Nikki picked like Cheez-Its, and Julie picked potato chips, and I got pretzels for Jacob. Um, and then Nikki picked baby carrots, and Julie loves cucumbers, and so does Jacob. So I just bought a bunch of cucumbers, and that's what they eat. And pickles, they love pickles. So another mistake I definitely made as a new mom was when Julie became a toddler and I moved her out of her crib into a toddler bed. I used to lay down on the floor next to her and wait for her to fall asleep and like lay with her. That was the biggest mistake I could have ever made, because then she wouldn't go to sleep unless I was right there laying next to her. And it would take her an hour, 2 hours sometimes to fall asleep. I mean, this girl was an insomniac, and I would have to lay there. And sometimes I would end up falling asleep on the floor because I was just so tired. So I would say, lay your kid down and walk out of the room. Let them cry a few minutes. Let them cry it out. Do not sleep with them on the floor.
Yeah, well, they say that you're supposed to let them cry it out. They learn how to put themselves to sleep, you know?
Well, I guess that's one of the mistakes I made as a mom, is that my first time mom, is I didn't ever want to let my baby cry ever. Like I didn't ever want to hear her crying. You know, I always wanted to, for me, it was like, oh, she's crying. Something's wrong. I need to fix it. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, no, I mean, you kind of like get to know what's the fake cry and what's like them just trying to put themselves to sleep pretty much.
Another mistake that I made with Julie is trying to get her to potty train too soon. I remember trying to get her to pee on the toilet when she was like 18 months, and my aunt sat me down and she's like, Roxy, I know you want her to like grow up. She's like, but she's way too young for this. So then I realized like it's not the right time. So we went ahead and waited like another 6 months, and then that was so much better. Because if you do it too soon, it can cause like problems later when you're at, like, they're not ready. So you're gonna try to force them to do something they're not ready for mentally.
I think I like I tried to push Nate a little early with the potty training, but he just wasn't ready. And you know, it's more painful as a parent than it is for them. But Lacey was potty trained a little earlier than Nate was. But I mean, 18 months, I feel like it's a little early. But
Yeah.
I mean, every kid's different though.
I mean, she did pee in the potty when she was 18 months, but I think it was just like a fluke. Like she seen me peeing, and so I sat her down. She wasn't ready to be like fully trained, you know? So I learned that. Also another mistake especially this day and age, is allowing too much screen time for your toddlers. They say that you really should not have any screen time at all before the age of 2. Uh, I Julie definitely got way too much screen time. She would watch TV. She would play on our phones, on the iPad. We would use it as a device to like keep her quiet or entertained, like when we were out places and stuff. So we learned that not to give him the screen so soon.
So some of the mistakes that you can make with your teenager is not being updated in their world. Try to take like a refresher course and learn like what your teenager is doing like on the internet or like with these new apps that they keep coming out with and what they actually are, and monitoring like what they're doing, so that way you're better prepared, and try to be aware of their anxieties and other things that are in your teen's world, so we can guide them in the right way. And I really hope when my kids become teenagers that I'll be so involved in their life that they can just come and talk to me about anything. So we had a whole episode on puberty. That's another issue that, teens are going to be going through, that I would hope whatever they're going to be going through, that they can come to me or Rob or you or Martin. Another big thing is like drugs and alcohol. Obviously, as you get older and peer pressure sets in, people tend to drink, they do drugs. I mean, I know when I was a teen, I did pretty much anything that anybody put in front of my face. I don't know if that was just like me trying to fit in or like I just wanted to experiment and try certain things. But my parents weren't there for me like that. Like I never told them anything, And like I remember I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 18 and they found it in my bag and they like tried to tell me to stop. And I'm like, I'm 18 years old. Like you can't tell me to stop. I mean, I ended up stopping after a year anyways because I hated it. But I just think that being more up to date in their world and in this growing world of technology is going to help you in the long run.
I totally agree with that. And I think that it's not just taking a refresher course. I wish it was that easy because like being a teen in today's world is completely different than a teen in our world. They have so much more technology these days. Their interests and their likes, I mean, for the most part, they're the same. They're interested in boys, and boys are interested in girls and going out and having fun. But the way that they have fun these days is a little different than the ways that we used to do it. So we have to just like stay current with the times too. Yeah. I feel like as parents. And then I feel like a big thing with teenagers too is to make sure that you give them their privacy. Because if you don't give your kids like the space and the privacy that they need as teenagers, what?
I said to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, but remember, like if they want to have their door closed in their room by themselves, that's okay. They're allowed to have the door closed. Make sure you knock before you don't just like walk in. You want to knock on the door and can I come in? Even if it's something harmless, it's just letting them know like, hey, I respect your privacy. You don't want to go snooping through their journals and reading unless there's a problem or something, then you feel like you need to read it or whatever, but not just for snooping purposes. You know what I mean? I just feel like giving your teenager their privacy and their space is very much needed. It kind of shows them that you trust them enough to, be left alone.
Yeah. I mean, I know when I was a teen, I had my door closed all the time, and my parents went in my room once and like went through my drawers and found like some stuff they shouldn't have really found, I guess. My dad got pretty pissed off, but he got over it. But so another mistake that you can make in your teen is having low expectations for them. So there's a saying that you can think of when it comes to your teens. Treat a man as he is, and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he can and should be, and he will become as he can and should be. So I think that if you set high expectations for your kid, then, you know, when they don't reach those expectations, at least they're not falling below the expectation. You know what I mean? Like if you just set like mediocre goals for them, then they'll just be a mediocre person in life. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I can agree with that. Definitely. I also think that it helps them when they're trying to set their own goals, it teaches them to set higher goals above what's expected too, because you're not just going to go and do the bare minimum because you know your parents would expect more from you. So you're going to set your goals above par. You know what I mean? I think another mistake that parents can make with their teens is not listening and trying to like talk before they listen. I think that a lot of teens, most of their issues come from feeling like they're not being heard, like their parents are not listening to them. That's why they get along so much better with their peers and their parents. It's hard for them to imagine that their parents were once their age. But I think that, you know, if as a parent you listen to really listen what about what they're saying, it's much easier to one, help them solve their problems, and two, just to let them know like, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah, that goes kind of into another thing I was going to say was not picking your battles wisely when it comes to a teen. So, you know, the teenager is trying to think for himself and be independent and in preparation for, you know, his adult life and when he moves out of your house. If you pick and choose the wrong battle, they can provoke confrontations between you and your child. So, you know, don't let like long hair or droopy jeans or black nail polish become like a major issue. Instead, use the time to focus on more serious issues that actually matter, because most likely they're just going through a phase and, you know, they'll get over it.
Yeah, I think that being a teenager is all about like finding yourself and finding out where you fit in the world. So it's really important to let your teenagers have that space without judgment, like kind of like make it a judgment free zone. I know it's really easy to make judgments about teenagers in general because, you know, we were there once and we probably could find some faults in ourselves. So we don't want our kids to make those mistakes, but they have to make those mistakes. That's what learning and being a kid is all about. You also don't want to forget to show your teenager respect. They say respect is earned, but you want to be able to show your kid respect so that way they will reciprocate it. You want to, one thing is like leading by example, you know? So I think that falls true more than ever as a teenager, a parent of a teenager.
I think another thing too is thinking that good grades equals a good team. So I feel like a lot of parents like are going to fall into that trap where they wrongly believe that as long as their teen maintains a great academic score, that he is safe and is well adjusted. But there are many bright teenagers with strong achievements in school who, you know, fall prey to drugs, bullying, and negative peer pressure and develop low self-esteem. So always watch for behavioral problems in your teen, and make sure you tackle them early on, so that way, you know, if they do have low self-esteem, they're not going to result in like hurting themselves or suicide or something drastic like that.
You also want to avoid criticizing them too much. If you feel like your child is making a mistake or using poor judgment or like acting in a risky way, it's not only what you say, but it's like the way that you say it. So you don't want to like come to them like accusatory and criticizing them all the time. Just acting, I think like speaking kindly and more gently and logically, I think that has a better effect than saying like, you shouldn't do that, drugs are bad for you, I can't believe you're doing that, like talk to them more like, I understand, peer pressure, I understand that you're a teenager and that these things are going to be available, but this is the reason why you don't, just speak to them in a more respectful way, and try not to criticize too much, because they're gonna take it as like, oh, my parents think I'm bad now.
I think another huge mistake that parents with teens make is trying to be your teen's best friend. This always reminds me of the Mean Girls movie when the mom comes in and she's like, oh, you girls want a martini? Oh, you need any condoms? Just let me know. Okay, no. Your teen does not need another friend, okay?
Right.
He needs a parent. He needs a role model. He needs a mentor. So that does not mean that like a friend, you can't hang out together or talk about like emotional stuff and be a good listener. But remember that what he needs is someone he can look up to and someone who can help draw the boundaries. And a friend is not equipped for that role.
Absolutely. I like that one a lot. You have to be your kid's parent first and friend second. Teens are also tend to be like more rebellious. They give a little bit of pushback to their parents. So I think one thing that parents tend to forget to do a lot when they become parents to teenagers is to tell them that they love them often, because you're not hearing, it's easy to say, like when your kids, they tell you they love you all the time, and it's easy to say, I love you too. But when they become teenagers, you might not always love their actions or their attitude, but it's still important to let them know that they're loved, and to speak out of love and care, and, just remind them often how much you care about them and you love them.
The last mistake that I think that parents make is not preparing your teen for adolescence. So most of us in our generation, we just like tumbled in and out of our teen years. No one really prepared us about the changes we went through. So that type of attitude doesn't work for now. Our teens have to cope with an overload of media, digital content, brands and advertising, and adverse peer pressure. So we need to prepare them for the road ahead, but don't be like preachy about it. Instead, have informal, short conversations, spend time with them, see movies with them, and talk about them later. So the bottom line, parents, is your little ones are already teenagers and soon they will be adults. So it is important for you to assess your parenting approach and try to understand what is happening inside your teen's head and heart that'll do both you and your teen a world of good. So happy parenting to all of us parents out there, because it's definitely a long journey and we have a long road ahead of us.
And everybody makes mistakes being a parent. Every single one of us. There are no perfect parents, no matter what social media will tell you. Does not exist. So do not be hard on yourself if you find yourself making some of these mistakes. I think the biggest thing is just recognizing, but like, hey, I'm making this mistake, and how can you improve it? Don't be judgmental on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. Just do better. You know better, you do better. That's all that you can do, is just continue to keep improving. And a lot of us just make these mistakes on our first kid. We typically learn by the time we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I don't know however many kids you have. The more you have, the more you learn, I guess. But there's going to be a first time for everything, and you're not going to always know how to handle the situation.
I agree with all of that. And, like you said, parenting is not easy, and it's one of the hardest jobs out there, and we all make mistakes, but you can learn to deal with those mistakes or help your child to better prepare themselves in life and all sorts of scenarios and different situations that they might come across in life. We hope that you got some good advice and tips out of this episode. And hopefully if you have any newborns, toddlers, or some raging hormonal teens, that you can use these tips to help you out and become a better parent.
Well, we had so much fun talking to you guys today. I can't wait to see you guys again for TGIF Friday, and we will see you guys in our next episode. Have a great day, Candid Mamas.
Thank you so much for listening to Candid Motherhood Podcast.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe, share, and rate our podcast.
If you have any ideas for future episodes or want to learn more about us, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram at candid.motherhood and on Twitter at @cmotherhood.
We appreciate your love and support. Until next time, thank you, Candid Mamas.